Hello and welcome back to the Fracking Farmhouse. Now last time out we talked about the end of fracking and I said, but there was a but. And there was a but because we were looking at the dreadful results from Preston New Road and Tinker Lane and all that, and we're looking, it's got to be the end of fracking. I said, but INEOS. Because INEOS, who want to drill just over a mile away from here at Marsh Lane, they're not interested in gas security of supply. They want gas as a feedstock for their plastics factory or for their big factories. So there's a bit more, they're not into selling it into the grid. So I've always thought that INEOS were a different kettle of fish. And sure enough, last week, INEOS broke their silence and did a press statement with their chairman, Sir Jim Radcliffe, the country's richest man. So here we are with the press statement, and INEOS calls for the government to end unworkable shale policy, or end shale, we like that one, thanks Jim. And basically they has today called for the government to increase the shale seismicity limit from an unworkable 0.5 to a more sensible level on the Richter scale. And we talked about this last time, so like 0.5 is what the industry agreed when there was earthquakes in Lancashire that fractured the pipe of the first shale well in the UK. And that's why you need to have tighter thresholds on UK things. It's not so much the surface, it's down there where you've got the chemicals, you've got the pressure, you've got the gases. You don't want to fracture that pipe because that can pollute the groundwater, which has happened in America. And so when INEOS first came to our village, they sort of said, well, I know there's been a lot of environmental problems in America, but it won't happen in England because we have gold standard regulations. We have better regulations than America. And they talked about, you know, the seismic levels. But see, this thing, what it says, the government insists on absurd seismic thresholds for shale. At 180,000 times lower than the USA, where 1 million wells have been safely drilled. 1 million, right, there's two things there, isn't there? There's a million wells. They've only been going just over a decade, a bit more. 1 million wells they've drilled. The New York survey reckons about 2% pollute groundwater. So 2% of 1 million, do the maths, lots of wells polluting the groundwater. But 1 million wells safely drilled. So we were told when INEOS turned up here, it's not going to be like the environmental disaster that America is because we're going to regulate it. And now as soon as the regulations get in their way, they said, oh, you want to change it to America where it's safe. Now, a couple of days ago, I went to see a talk by somebody called Sharon Wilson. She is an American, she's a Texan, 5th generation Texan. She used to work in the oil and gas industry, and they came and fracked her land. She had 42 acres. They fracked her land because she didn't own the mineral rights. She said, first of all, the air turned brown, then the water turned black, and she moved. She moved into town, Denton, because she thought it was safe in town. And once they drilled 300 wells in town, in Denton, they got organised and they got a petition and they voted to ban fracking in Denton. And this is a very Republican area. It's very oil and gas, very drill baby drill, Tea Party area, but they experienced it. And it's the health effects that they were experiencing that led them to vote 60-40 to ban fracking. Very shortly afterwards, the state passed a law saying you're not allowed to ban fracking. So, but what were they experiencing? Well, they said the modus operandi of the oil and gas industry. Sorry, the Oscar on sitting on the paperwork. And this is where Jim Radcliffe gets his safe wells from, because what they have is they say there's no proof that all the illnesses were caused by fracking. And if you don't have baseline testing, you just say, I'm ill, pollution. They said it was all right there before. But if you do have proof, if you have baseline testing, if you measured the air, the water, the health before the frackers arrived, you have proof So you go to court and you prove, the landowner proves that these health effects are done. And then what the oil and gas industry does is it agrees a settlement with you. And it says, we'll give you money, but you've got to sign off a non-disclosure agreement. And that way, that evidence vanishes, and so they can go back to stage one and say there's no proof. And this is happening over and over and over again in America. Why don't people stand up to them, eh? Why don't you say, why are they signing these non-disclosures? I met a Canadian, Jessica Ernst, who was doing exactly that. 11 years she's waited for it to come to court. That's a long time. When you've got kids, you can't wait that long. So people sign the non-disclosure. But what they were measuring in Denton, they do the air test before the frackers arrived. They test for 84 chemicals in the air, and there were 7 polluting chemicals. After the frackers arrived, they tested again. There were 64. Ethane, ethylene, acetylene, propane, dichlorofluoromethane, isobutane, N-butane. These are making people ill. They're coughing, feeling tired, blisters on skin, gagging, vomiting, sore throat, rash, eyes swollen, terrible headache, runny nose, nosebleed. Blurry vision, migraine, heart palpitations, congestion, sneezing, all these things are happening. I said to Sharon at the meeting, I said, I've got INEOS's press statement here. It says, in America, 1 million wells have been safely drilled. What's your comment? She says they're lying. And that's what it comes down to. INEOS are lying when they say that. And they are not being safely drilled in America. Fracking is very different from conventional oil and gas extraction, and it makes people ill, and they shouldn't be allowed to say this. You know, there's no references here, no scientific things to back it up. It's just their rant. It's not safe. And one of the other things that Sharon said was the attitude of the oil and gas companies. Their sense of entitlement and arrogance. And we found this when we went up against them at the public inquiry. They were sort of looking down at us. What are you, a little village? Look, we're so wealthy, you know. Like. And Sharon says in America, it's like they have this attitude that they have an idea to make money, and if you get in the way, it's just your fault for not being as bright as them and as not being as thrusty as them. And if you're going to get ill, it's your fault. That's their attitude. And I thought of this sense of entitlement when I saw that INEOS have just commissioned their very own coat of arms. Yeah, I mean, to go back to heraldry, talk about arrogance and things. So here's the coat of arms, and I must thank Nigel Lee for help. He must know more about heraldry than me. But if you have a look at it, you've got right through the middle of the coat of arms, you've got an earthquake releasing a fiery dragon, that must be INEOS, which looks like it's about to attack the beehive. So that's probably, you know, indicative of the 80% decline in insects that we're seeing there. Underneath, you've got dolphins swimming through strands of plastic, signifying obviously how INEOS are polluting the oceans with all their plastic. But in between them, you've got a double V's up from there. There's a VZ there. You really couldn't make this up. And it says Vimi Vici, which apparently translates as, I mean, it's obviously a nod to Julius Caesar. These guys are not arrogant, we're just like Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, I came, I saw, I conquered. Well, we've got with INEOS, I came, I bought, I conquered. They conquered. They're not conquering our village, and they ain't fracking here. And so, from a very angry fracking farmer, if it wasn't so desperately sad, it would be funny. But INEOS are not drilling here. We do hope the government stand firm. We have got a 0.5 limit, and despite that, we had 1.5 tremors in Preston New Road. We can't relax the limits to the American levels because we'll get ill. Okay, thanks very much for watching. Bye.